We want to make sure we capture all of this. So again, good afternoon. I appreciate you all taking the time out of your very demanding lives to join us in virtual community today to put a face to this issue, to this crisis, this nearly $2 trillion crisis. Your willingness to share your stories has made the difference in this movement and in this fight. And it has been a fight. And in large part, it's been a fight because the narrative has not told the entire story. And for too long, policymakers have dismissed this crisis as one that only impacts the wealthy and the privileged, talking about the impact only through statistics and data points, marginalizing, or at least attempting to, who's impacted by this crisis, and in fact, even who cares about it. But the movement, the grassroots movement has changed that. Spaces and conversations like this have really proven just how deep, widespread, and mainstream this crisis is, affecting people, burdening people at every walk of life. Folks like yourselves who have stepped up and spoken out, sharing your stories, and yes, even reliving and sharing your debt despair associated with this has shed a light on the real psychological and human toil of this crisis. As I've said so many times before, unfortunately, there's great shame associated to and as a part of debt. And I know that has certainly been my own experience as well. So I know this isn't easy. I, for one, have my own debt story. Like millions across this country, I too fell into default on a student loan, despite working multiple jobs and doing everything possible to make ends meet and to get ahead. You know, life happened and got in the way. And the financial distress set me back years. And while this debt is now repaid, I remember all too well the shame, the anxiety, and the trauma that I was living with this never-ending debt collection phone calls. So this is a kitchen table issue. This is an intergenerational issue. This is a racial, economic, and disability justice issue. It is long past time that we treat it as such. So again, I thank you for taking time out of your day, for being a part of this fight. I thank you for emboldening this movement. And in doing so, by amplifying your stories, changing the narrative, and the incremental victories that we've seen along the way have everything to do with your willingness to share your stories. So again, I look forward to hearing from all of you. I firmly believe that by continuing to center the people is what is going to help us to ultimately realize life-changing student debt cancellation and get this across the finish line. And in fact, we are closer than ever. All right, so let's get into it. Pam, can you start us off?
Yes. Thank you for having me. My name is Pam Hunt. I'm speaking today as someone who pursued a college degree at for-profit Corinthian College and ended up buried in student debt. I'm part of a group of people who declared a student debt strike back in 2015, the Corinthian 100. As many of you may know, we recently learned that the Biden administration is going to cancel the debts of everyone who attended Corinthian colleges, a collapsed predatory for-profit chain. Nearly $6 billion owed by 560,000 people, gone. That debt relief will change people's lives. But I'm here to tell you that this victory was not handed to us. President Biden didn't cancel our loans out of the kindness of his heart. He did it because we pressured 3 different administrations. From the start, my fellow strikers and I demanded that the government cancel the federal student loans for every Corinthian student automatically. Instead, officials tied the process up in red tape, delaying and denying the relief we legally deserved. After more than 7 years, we finally won this battle, but the war rages on. Before I talk about the battles to come, I want to say a few words about myself. I am a student debtor, I am a fighter, and I am a mother of 8 children. Like so many others, I went to school later in life trying to better myself and provide for my family. A few years ago, I tried to buy a house. I wanted to buy a home because one of my children is severely disabled and needs 24-hour care. His name is Josh. There are certain things Josh needs that would make his quality of life better, like a ramp, a ceiling lift, wider doorways, but you can't make renovations to a rental home. Right now, Josh can't live in the whole house. He's stuck in a few rooms because he can't move freely. You can't, like I said, make renovations to a rental home. Until I can buy a home, Josh can't be a full member of our family, and it's heartbreaking. I tried several times to get a mortgage, but my application was rejected. Why? Student debt. Banks wouldn't lend to me because of what they called my debt to income ratio. Once I was even turned down by Habitat for Humanity. That's scary. And that's when you know you're in real trouble. Student debt impacts every corner of your life. It keeps you from getting other things that you need to live. And in my case, I couldn't afford to a home for my family. After my Corinthian loans were canceled, I applied again for a mortgage. This time I was approved, but I still owe tens of thousands of dollars for earning a bachelor's at UConn, which is a public college. The bank perceives future student debt payments, and therefore the amount they approve for mortgage will still not afford me a home, especially in today's housing market. In many ways, I'm in the same place financially. This is why I say that student debtors don't want forgiveness. We want justice. The fact that the government was able to cancel debt from Corinthian College for me and so many others tells me that the government has the power to do more. So why doesn't it? I have a few other questions. What part did politicians play in getting us to the point where people are 6 figures in debt for an education? Why did I have tens of thousands of dollars tacked onto my loans and interest payments alone? Who did this? Who is responsible? The people who created this crisis need to fix it. I want to end by talking about my kids. I had to take out Parent Plus loans for their education, and they have their own student debt. One of my daughters wants to be a filmmaker, the other a school counselor, and another a nurse. Doesn't our society need people like that? Our children should be able to live and follow their dreams, and they shouldn't have to do it at the expense of having a future. This is why Biden should use the authority to cancel student debt for everyone. This is why college should be free. I don't want to hear anything else about $10,000. I still have over $100,000 in student debt. My daughters are tens of thousands of dollars in the hole. $10,000 of debt relief would do nothing for any of us. We need all of this debt gone for good. The recent news of the $6 billion in Corinthian student loan relief shows that the government has the ability to cancel student debt immediately and automatically. The government should not make anyone jump through bureaucratic hoops or red tape to access debt cancellation. I'll close by saying a few words about organizing. Before I joined the Debt Collective and got involved in student debt strike, I didn't understand how much power there is in numbers. Now I do. During the Corinthian fight, I met many other people who had attended that same school. When we started speaking with one voice, our message resonated until it could not be ignored. You know what else organizing taught me? It taught me that if you want to change the world, you have to fight. I am a fighter. We should all be able to access public goods like education, without debt. Canceling student debt is a step to getting us there. Cancel the debt, Joe. I'm here to let the president know that I'll keep fighting with my fellow debtors until we win. After all, I was one of the first debt strikers in US history, and I'm not going anywhere.
All right. All right, Pam, thank you so much. All right, next we'll hear from, I don't want to mispronounce your name. Is it Tara or Tara?
It's Tara.
Okay, Tara. Oh, I know you. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Just thank you to everyone for putting together this platform. I am really humbled and honored to fight alongside each and every one of you. So a little bit about myself and how debt has affected me. So my name is Tara Sung. I am a physician assistant working in women's health. I am 29 years old, and as of right now, I owe $115,000. However, I graduated owing over $150,000 in graduate school debt, including an additional $20,000 for my undergraduate education. I have only been able to make a dent in my loan balance because of the federal loan payment pause, which has been a lifesaver to me and my family, which includes my parents and a sister with autism. I checked my loan servicer's homepage every 2 weeks from the height of COVID to now to see if repayments were starting again. Every time I would see the new date for repayment, I'd scramble to see how much I could afford to pay when repayment would start. Then they would extend it and I would be so grateful. And I know I'm not the only one with a similar daily anxiety like this. And working in women's health is so fulfilling, but getting here wasn't easy. And as you've already heard, it's come at a very high cost. I graduated from PE school in 2019. I started working in March 2020, which is exactly when COVID hit. My colleagues and I never stopped. Our office was open 7 days a week. We saw 30 to 40 patients every day, even at the peak of COVID, and we performed routine exams to life-saving procedures. I'm also a first-generation college student. My parents emigrated here from South Korea and gave all they had to my sister and myself. I wanted to make sure I had a professional career so that nothing my parents did for me would ever go to waste. And many of my decisions were executed through filial piety. I wanted to honor my parents, their sacrifice, and all of their struggles for me. And I also need to help take care of them and my autistic sister, who actually also has student loans to pay. And this is important because we often talk about student debt in terms of individuals, but in reality, it affects entire families, entire communities. And that means that canceling student debt doesn't only help me, it doesn't only help the person next to me, but it helps entire families. And like millions of others, my family and I are feeling the pinch of rising costs and rents. I live with my parents in order to save money every month, and I dream of being able to help them buy a home. And of course, I also worry about my own future and whether I will ever be able to buy my own home and how I will retire. My partner and I would love to have solid plans to be married, have our own future, but my struggle in caring for my family in the midst of all my debt is a huge impediment to that dream. For so many people my age, our student loans are making it impossible for us to plan ahead. I'm the kind of person who likes to plan ahead. And I'm the kind of person who likes to be very organized and on top of things, but the debt that I have is daunting. When I first graduated and saw the amount I owed, I panicked. My generation graduates with all of this money on our shoulders. It's estimated that 70% of American nurses leave their nursing programs with between $40,000 and $50,000 in debt. And I can't fathom how this is possible. How have we gotten to a point where people have to take on so much debt in order to do a job that is so essential to society, as we've seen over the last few years? Debt is also a huge factor that discouraged me from actually going to medical school. Many of my professors and attending physicians told me I would have made a great doctor and pushed me to take my MCAT and go to medical school. And I was always flattered when they said that. But I knew that if I did go to medical school, I would owe hundreds of thousands at the end, so much more than I already have. And I would have made nothing during residency. Debt would have continued to pile up, and my family would continue to go through difficult times. I knew that if I became a physician assistant, I could start working and earning money immediately. I love my job and I love being a physician assistant, but I think the story points to a bigger problem. Who gets to be a professional in this country? Who can afford to be a doctor? What talents are going to waste because finances are stopping them from moving in the direction they'd like? There's an idea that student debtors are somehow privileged, but in reality, people take out student loans because their families don't have the money to pay for college, to pay for graduate school. And for someone from my background, I had no choice but to take out loans. I don't regret my path, but I don't think it's completely fair. One of the reasons I chose to be in the healthcare profession was to give back and do something good for my community. My fellow healthcare workers are all about servant leadership and giving back to others. All we are doing is giving back, especially during COVID. And you can see that people have literally risked their lives to serve others, but we are being held back by our student debt. And I didn't always realize how simple it was for the president to cancel student debt. For me, if someone has the power to do this simply by signing an executive order, why would they not do it? And why make people suffer with this debt on their shoulders? And with the pandemic still going and the economy so uncertain, costs rising, families like mine need help. And I hope the president keeps his promise and cancels student debt.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I have a lot of reaction to what you and Pam have shared, but I have to keep us going, and so I'll save my my commentary until everyone has had an opportunity. Dave, would love to hear from you.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it. I was very honored to be asked to join today. So my name is David Ormsby. I live here in the Detroit, Michigan area. I'm 50 years old, so like Pamela, I went back to school late in life. I have about $90,000 in student loan debt. I decided to go back to college, University of Michigan, Dearborn, and get my business degree. I was really going nowhere in a retail manager's job. And I knew that if I was going to try and move myself up in that company, or any company for that matter, I would need a degree. It took me 9 years to finally get my degree. And during those 9 years, I was working anywhere from 40 to 60 hours a week, plus trying to go to school and raising a family, and then also trying to help my father, who had early onset Alzheimer's. So I would often schedule myself a 2-hour class in the afternoon when I could. I'd leave for work for a few hours, go to school, and then drive back to work and work an extra 2 hours to make up for that time that I was in school. Or sometimes I'd have evening classes and I would have to leave for work at 6 a.m., go to work, and then eventually go to school in the evening, sometimes not getting home till 8 or 9 o'clock, still having to do some homework and some schoolwork. Fortunately for me, my wife worked from home, or things would have been so much worse. She was there to take care of our kids, who I rarely saw. I knew that the debt I was amassing, though, I just couldn't walk away from it even if I wanted to. I would have had all that student loan debt and no degree. When I graduated, though, it really was one of the proudest moments in my life. But the reality of the debt I was in really came not long after. For the next 2 degrees, next 2 years, my degree wasn't even paying off. I was still in retail, and then for shortly I became an operations manager, but I really had no increase in my salary. What I was being asked to pay for on a monthly basis was almost 2 car payments. I really could only afford the bare minimum, and even that was a struggle at times. I hear so many people saying, that student loan, debt cancellation is really just going to benefit, young, rich people. But for me, I'm a working class individual, always have been. And I'm sure there are lots of millions of other people who are out there in that same situation. It's not just a rich person's issue. This is a working class issue. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I'm not there on Wall Street or going to law school. The reality of the situation is that my job does not pay the kind of money that a degree warranted. I couldn't get a good job without my degree. Now I also work part-time job to help me pay off my student loan. The system here has me by the throat. You can't go out and make a decent living without a degree, but then you don't get the salary available to help pay off that degree. So one thing here is being in Detroit, I got to experience firsthand the auto industry bailout. The government obviously knew it could not let the big three fold. So they bailed out. They bailed the big three out. The government came along a few years later and bailed out the banks because it had to be done. Taxpayers like myself, we paid for it. This situation is no less serious of an issue at all. Inflation's soaring. Working people are struggling to make ends meet. My grocery bill's sometimes twice where it used to be. And our president here has a real chance, an opportunity to do something that no other president has done. He really needs to cancel his student debt to make this work for working families. We can't be drowned in red tape. Everywhere you go in Washington, it's red tape everywhere. I'd like to see him extend the payment pause at least through this year to allow people to kind of catch their breath. I myself have been trying to pay off little bits and pieces of the interest that I had before the payment pause. So that's one thing that I've been doing to try to get a little bit of headway to get this done. But the president, Joe Biden, really needs to make sure that this cancellation is big enough. The $10,000 is just not enough. It's a drop in the well for some of us. He has a really big moment to try and win something for the working people right now. Working people who are not very happy with what's going on in Washington. This really could be something historic. But as a working class person and voter from Detroit, I really would like to know what the president and what our elected officials in Washington are going to do to try and help us. Thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. Y'all are going to put me out of a job. You are each making the case in such a compelling, effective, and convincing way, and I'm grateful for your candor and transparency here. So let's keep this trend going. Jen, you're up next.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Jen Lezan, and I'm a 36-year-old Mexican and Puerto Rican American organizer. I attended the for-profit college, the Illinois Institute of Art, and grad school at Benedictine University, and I have over $170,000 in student loan debt. And that includes loans from a for-profit college and a so-called traditional school. And my story isn't unique. It's very similar to everyone here who has talked, and it's a story that's shared by many like me. I was the first in my family to graduate high school and attend college. I grew up in a single parent household in poverty on the west side of Chicago. I witnessed abuse, drug addiction, and gang violence. And my mom dropped out of high school because she had me. So she truly believed that me pursuing higher ed would help break the cycle of trauma and poverty that our family experienced. My mother didn't have savings for college, and this wasn't for lack of trying. This is because she worked as a housekeeper and we lived paycheck to paycheck. I started working at 14 to help keep my family afloat. We had no generational wealth, and there was no amount of bootstrapping and saving that we could have done for me to be able to afford college. Through it all, though, I believed in the power of education. For years, I was told that the way out of poverty was to pursue higher education. Getting an education is not a choice for people of lower income and for minorities like me. The way we start a career to better our lives often demands that we have a degree. So we take out loans and we pursue college. And it's frustrating to know that older generations, the president's generation, could work a part-time job and pay their tuition. But by the time people like me wanted to go to college, that funding, those grants, that support was taken away and tuition skyrocketed. I completed a bachelor's and then a master's in hopes of better opportunities. And despite graduating top of my MBA class in 2011, as a woman and a Latinx millennial, my income has not kept up with inflation. I recently read a statistic that said a Latina would have to work on average till the age of 101 for her career earnings to catch up to the career earnings of white men at age 60. Let's add the current inflation and cost of living increases on top of that. Yet, I don't give up. I work multiple jobs as an educator and a freelancer. And as a mother, I'm fighting for my family and for others like me. We're often told we didn't do enough. We didn't apply to enough scholarships. We didn't work enough, even though many of us had full-time jobs throughout college. The reality is, though, we never had enough to start with. So instead of becoming a victim of my circumstances, I decided to work to change those circumstances. So many people, including myself at one point, think, what good can I do? How can one person change the world? Yet it's all of us individuals working together that create change. Those in power within this world want us to think that we're insignificant, that we're powerless. And what scares them the most is when a bunch of regular folks like us come together to expose the broken and corrupt systems in place and demand change. Recently, the Debt Collective has been pegged as some radical organization, as though demanding the same opportunities previous generations had is radical. What we really are is a collective of regular people here: parents, grandparents, students, teachers, librarians, doctors, working class people, people who are scammed by higher ed. And we're fighting for our basic rights as citizens and for a chance to pursue education without being burdened by debt. We are who won't stop fighting if things don't change. When Corinthian students went on strike in 2015, I was inspired. I had also been defrauded by a for-profit college. Former students of other schools started to get organized and demand student loan cancellation, learning from the example of Pam and others that they had set. Our movement had been a success. We've shown that the government can cancel student debt. In addition to the $6 billion in cancellation Pam mentioned for Corinthians, people who attended other for-profit colleges are finally seeing relief, including, I hope, me. But it's only a partial relief because my graduate loans won't be included in cancellation. And this is why full cancellation is needed. The fact is, all student loans are illegitimate, not just loans from for-profit colleges. And I want to close with some words for President Biden. Education should be a right and not a privilege entitled only to those who can afford it. The student debt bubble and issues like for-profit colleges are just a symptom of a much, much larger problem. The higher ed system is broken. The current way of financing higher education hurts many, but it harms people of color the most. The pandemic and continued growing disparate issues of the world have only brought to the surface the cracks that have been slowly creeping to the top. Now is the time to act, to cancel student debt for everyone and make public college free once and for all, to create opportunities for the American people, all American people, not just the elite. No one should have to mortgage their life to better it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Very eloquent, and appreciate your highlighting the intergenerational nature of this crisis. And next we'll hear from Cancellation.
Hello, everyone. Wow, what an audience. Hi, my name is Kesley Noria Carrion, and I currently live in North Carolina. I graduated college with $115,000 of student loan debt, $35,000 of which was in my mother's name. I've paid off about 60% of my share. I'm a veteran and a first-generation college graduate raised in the Bronx by a single mother who is an Afro-Latina immigrant from the Dominican Republic. I was brought up with the idea that education was our way to fulfill the American dream, a dream that was only accessible through debt. Unlike many of my peers within the commissioned officer ranks, I didn't grow up in a military family. I had zero connections. When I was initially planning for college, I hadn't ever heard of ROTC before, let alone the scholarships. As a freshman cadet at the Virginia Military Institute, I did a semester with the Navy, then another with the Marines, and finally, as a sophomore, I contracted with the Army because they were the only ones offering me a monthly stipend. This was something I desperately needed since any income my mother could spare was sunk into my tuition. Halfway through sophomore year, I realized how tight our finances really were, and I knew I would have to find some way of making money if I wanted to stay in school. So I enlisted in the Virginia Army National Guard. The deal was I would drill or train with my unit one weekend a month so I could earn a little extra money to support myself through school. I'd like to take a moment to mention that when I raised my right hand and swore my oath to defend the Constitution of the United States and obey the orders of the President, that don't ask, don't tell was the policy in effect for policing the lives of LGBTQ+ service members like me. At 19 years old, I made a grave commitment to my country, while my country had yet to commit to me. For 3 years, I juggled the requirements of enlisted service while attending an incredibly demanding senior military college. During my junior year, the Pentagon decided to cut the ROTC student loan repayment program, so any hope I had for loan forgiveness upon commissioning as an Army officer was gone. The debt I carried would be another burden on my already heavy load. Before senior year, money became even more of an issue. To keep me in school, my mother had to make an emergency withdrawal of $50,000 from her pension. She took a 20% tax hit on this, and it still wasn't enough. So I took out a $25,000 private loan in the form of something called a career starter loan. This money is meant to help young officers jumpstart their careers and purchase the tools they need to be effective leaders. But instead, I had to add it to my accumulating pile of student loan debt. I graduated from VMI in 2013. After the ceremony, friends and family offer their graduates gifts, to include brand new cars and checks for thousands of dollars so they can start their careers off on the right track, debt-free. My gift was that my family was able to afford the trip to Virginia to celebrate our first ever college graduation. We celebrated our family's victory, though the moment was bittersweet under a shadow of debt. 7 years later, I was medically discharged from the Army due to injuries I sustained as a senior-rated jump master during a night mass tactical airborne operation. Upon exiting the aircraft, my main parachute suffered a total malfunction, and after I pulled my reserve, instead of catching air, it flopped down and wrapped itself around my boots. I was able to get it untangled just soon enough to break my fall. I am one of out of almost 4 million disabled veterans with broken bodies and wounded minds who are not sufficiently cared for by their country. I am also one of hundreds of thousands of veterans who are saddled with student loans, many of whom are in default. In a way, I'm lucky. Since graduation, I've paid down a good portion of my debt, but like many, those payments have come at a huge cost. That money could have been used for a down payment on a home, to fund gender-affirming care, or to help my mother recover her pension that she sacrificed for my education. I'm now in graduate school studying human-computer interaction, and I study the designs of systems and whether they are accessible to everyone. I've heard that the current administration is considering a process that will allow for people to apply for debt relief, perhaps by putting it up on a website. It makes me think about myself at 17 when I was applying to colleges and how I didn't have the resources to know about those invaluable ROTC scholarships. How many people will miss out on relief as a result of inaccessible procedures? We need student debt cancellation to be granted automatically to everyone. Confusing processes and burdensome paperwork will only hurt the most vulnerable. Research shows that canceling all student debt would create millions of new jobs, boost the economy, narrow the racial wealth gap, and mobilize voters. Canceling student debt is something President Biden can do single-handedly. That would be life-changing for so many. 71% of the people in my generation want him to cancel student debt. We need him to. Every student debtor has a unique story, and we are all part of a larger systemic problem that requires a systemic solution. Part of that solution is student loan forgiveness for each and every last one of us. Thank you so much for listening to what I had to share today.
Thank you, Kesley. Thank you to each of you. I just want to pick up on the point or the experience that I shared earlier, and some of which was echoed in the undercurrent of what you said, but I want to give each of you or whoever would like to comment the space to speak to it more directly. You know, it's not just the interest and the financial burden that is compounded. The shame and the psychological and mental toll is compounded. And I wonder if anyone would like to speak to that impact, not just the financial burden, but the psychological one.
Well, I can tell you, you know, it's tough when you're looking at your bills month in and month out, and you want to do something for your kid's birthday. You want to join your family. Your family's going to go out of town, or your family's going to go have an event at an amusement park, and you're so tight that you've got to either A, come up with an excuse why you can't go and your kids can't go have fun, or you have to somehow figure a way where you can still pay on your student loans. You see other family members, they're doing better. They might buy a new house, or they may go on a huge vacation. They may remodel their kitchen, and you're stuck trying to make ends meet. And again, working 2 jobs to do so. And you sit there saying, what are they doing right that I'm not? What is it that I'm not doing that they are? And it's a psychological toll, not only on yourself, but on your spouse. You spend days worrying about, how you're going to make ends meet. And even when you don't, even when things are okay, it's like a big shadow looming in the background, like you're just waiting, for the next thing to fall. I'm like I said, I'm 50 years old. I'm probably, I could likely be dead before my student loan is paid off, unless something is done. So yeah, there is a huge psychological and emotional piece to this of shame and disappointment in yourself.
Thanks so much, Dave. Thank you for sharing that. Pam?
Yeah, I wanted to say there's a lot of shame and psychological torment for me because, I just feel like I led my kids into a never-ending cycle of, debt and struggle as they grow up, because I'm the one who said, just like Jen said, college, school, education, that's what's going to make you, that's what's going to help you, that's what's going to further you ahead. And now, they have this debt, and because, like Dave, the degree they got didn't afford them the money that they would need to pay off the debt. So now they're all back in grad school, and I'm just sitting here thinking of what kind of legacy have I modeled for my kids, because that's where I'm at. I'm struggling. I'm in debt, trying to buy a home, and just to know that because of what I told them, because of what I was told, they're doing the same thing and they're following in my footsteps. And, it's psychologically damaging to me to know that, because as parents, you're supposed to be protecting your kids from any and everything, not leading them to the slaughter. And, all the schooling that I did when I was going to Corinthian, and like I said, my disabled son, leaving him with a child care provider, or just leaving my kids in general to go to the library to study, all those hours and all that time that I can never, ever, ever recoup. And to know, and I was so proud, oh, I'm going to have a master's in criminal justice and blah, blah, blah. And now to know that at the end of the day, it's a worthless piece of paper. It's embarrassing. It's shameful. It shouldn't be my shame. I didn't do it, but I'm the one who went through it. And I don't know, it's very psychologically damaging and embarrassing.
Yeah, Pam, Dave, again, just on this particular point, although all of you have done this in sharing your stories, I'm so appreciative of just how transparent you're being about the multi-layered ways with which this is impacting you. But also, I think it was Tar who made the point earlier, or it might have been Jenny, but just the fact that it's not just you individually. There is a residual impact. There is a familial impact here as well. So you're not the only one being burdened, although I could argue that for me as a lawmaker, it's enough if it is just you. But it is the entire family. And also, Pam, I would just ask you to extend some grace to yourself. You know, we've all, we live in the same society. We receive the same cultural messaging about a meritocracy and what is the great equalizer. And, you know, again, certainly low-income people and people of color were told that the way to close the racial wealth gap was to pursue higher education. And so, you know, we've done that. And in fact, that has exacerbated the wealth gap instead of narrowing it. Would anyone else like to speak to the psychological impacts before I move on to the next question? Okay. Some of you spoke about the relief that it has given you, afforded you these payment pauses, which again, I want to credit the movement for that. You know, that might be a fight legislatively and in the public discourse that myself and Leader Schumer and Senator Warren and others took on. But ultimately, we were successful in that, and the administration heeded our calls because of the strength of this growing movement and people like you and your willingness to share your stories. Could anyone speak more to what has been the benefit of that payment pause? What has it allowed you to do? And again, just speaking more to the transformational and meaningful impact that this debt cancellation would afford you. But if you could speak to what has been the benefit of the pause. Would anyone like to speak to that if you've benefited from the pause?
I can definitely speak on that. You know, like I said, I graduated and started my career at the peak of COVID. And at the peak of COVID, my hardworking, working class parents, they both work in salons. And so obviously those things were no longer accessible and they were unable to work at the time. And so the payment pause, I was so, and I'm still very grateful for it, because while they could not work and my parents, they don't have much savings, I was able to help pay the rent. I was also able to pay for a lot of the things that my sister needed. And I was able to save so much more money than I would have if I had to pay back my loans. And so I was really one of the main.
I'm sorry. So to that point, if the payments are resumed, what is that impact? What will that mean?
That would mean that my family's main financial route, I would no longer be able to really support them in the way that I have over the last few years. And, you know, to see them be a little bit more comfortable because I can help them is so rewarding and fulfilling for me. And so once I know that, I can no longer funnel my energy and my time and even my finances to help them, and I have to funnel everything into my loan payments again, it's going to even create more psychological trauma and stress than it ever has.
Right, thank you. Kelsey, I want to ask you about what you were saying around systems. And then my final question, just so that you can all be ruminating on it, is what is your direct message to President Biden? You know, what would you like to communicate to him in this moment if he was sitting right in front of you to make the case? So while you all ruminate on that, Kelsey, my question for you, and Pam might want to speak to this as well, is just there are some who are arguing for means testing, or who have ideas about, from a systems perspective, you know, how to do this. You know, speak to just with Corinthian as an example, that bureaucracy, even though that decision had been made, it has taken this long for you to experience that relief. So how important is it that this system be designed in a way that the impact of this is deeply and immediately felt? What are some thoughts on that, Kesley?
Being a veteran and then being a disabled veteran, I've had to deal with a lot of government websites and government paperwork and government language. And what I've found in trying to decipher all of this language is that it is incredibly inaccessible. It's very, I don't even know if academic's the right word, because it's very difficult to interpret. Coming from a family of immigrants, you know, I served as a translator for my family for quite a while, you know, growing up. And just the level of inaccessibility that I've seen just from my perspective as a disabled veteran, navigating the VA healthcare system, navigating my GI Bill, I've seen that I don't understand anything. This is someone who is a college graduate. You know, I've done the academia. I'm now in graduate school. I'm getting a Master of Science in a tech field. I know computers. I know websites. I design them. I fix them. And I can't figure out how to do what I need to do to get the things that the government said I was owed as a veteran for my service. So I feel that if we push this into some sort of an interface where it's going to be a portal, or you fill out paperwork and you submit it, that's going to leave millions and millions of people behind. Millions of people who are going to have a difficult time interpreting the information. Millions of people who don't even have access to internet, computers, printers, lawyers if they need it. It's just not fair. And if somebody has the power to forgive student loans with a signature and positively affect the life of millions and millions of people, not just the people with the debt, but their families in turn, why wouldn't we do it? It's a perfect solution.
Right. Automatic and broad. And someone had said earlier, you know, if you have the debt, you deserve the relief, right? So, you know, why any carve outs there? Okay. Pam, I don't know if your hand is still raised from earlier.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
So you can lower it.
Well,
Jenny,
it is raised from earlier. I'll lower it, but
okay.
I did just want to say something to that question as far as when we did the Corinthian when we went to Washington in 2015, and we handed a box of DTRs to that administration, and we said, okay, we kind of made the application because they didn't even know really, you know, how to even begin the process. So we handed them all of these applications for debt to repayment for these people who were defrauded. And my name was in that box, and that was in 2015. I didn't get relief until 2020. And so I just believe that as far as systems go, they're created by design to just say no. They're not out there to help us, or, you know, oh, okay, you can do this, go here and do this. And they make it seem like, yeah, you fill out this application, you know, we're with you. But it really is a way of them to cherry pick and choose who they're going to give it to, who they're not going to give it to, which makes no sense, because if Corinthian was founded to be a school that was doing illegal things and that they had defrauded the students, what difference does it make what year I went, what year you went, what degree I'm pursuing, what degree you're pursuing? The school itself was found to be defrauded. So everyone that went to that school should have been given relief.
Right. Now, Pam, I got you. You're like, listen, you know, the injustice and the hurt was immediate. So my relief needs to be just as swift.
Exactly.
Right? And,
exactly.
And I love that comment earlier about we're seeking more than forgiveness, we're seeking justice, because that really is what is at the crux here. Yeah. Yes. Jenny?
To piggyback off of what Pam said, we're still going through those issues. We're currently in the middle of a lawsuit with Art Institutes, and a whole bunch of you guys have all seen it in the news. And in order to get people involved in the class action, we're asking people to complete and finalize their defense to repayment applications, and the website is crashing constantly. People can't submit applications, so it's a continued issue. So my thought on this is, if cancellation is not broad and it is not immediate, the people who need it the most will not receive it. End of story. It needs to be immediate. It needs to be broad. If you can sign it off, let's do it, because the people who need it the most, if you don't do it this way, they will not have access to it, and that is not okay.
Cosign. Okay.